If you've ever felt like a place didn't want you there, like something was watching you from the shadows, or the air itself carried a warning, you're not crazy, because some towns truly are cursed, whether they're from ancient rituals, tragic massacres, deadly disasters, or plain old evil. These are the towns you should never visit, like ever. We're not talking about urban legends here. These are real places, documented, photographed, and in many cases still standing today, as if waiting for someone foolish enough to walk back in. Calabro, Italy, the town where saying its name brings misfortune. Locals won't even say its name, they just call it that town. Calabro sits high in the hills of southern Italy, and it has a reputation so toxic that, so much as whisper in the town and its surrounding villages, people actually spit on the ground to ward off evil. It all began when a high-powered lawyer declared in court, "If I'm lying, may this chandelier fall." And it did, right onto the courtroom floor. Nobody was hurt, but from that moment on, Calabria was doomed. Now, over the next few decades, people in nearby areas blamed the town for everything from sudden passings to car crashes to crops falling. One popular theory is that the curse comes from La Catre, which is a mysterious woman said to be a witch who lived in isolation and was blamed for casting evil spells on men who rejected her. Now, even tourists report electronics malfunctioning as soon as they enter the village. There are stories of people experiencing sudden nosebleeds, dizzy spells, and even blackouts while walking through its eerily quiet streets. The town capitalizes on the myth with an annual festival, but the locals, they keep their distance. Dudleytown, Connecticut, the village that drove people mad. Now, deep in the woods of Connecticut, a once thriving settlement is now completely erased from modern maps. Dudleytown has no street signs, no population, just rumors, whispers, warnings. It was founded in the 1740s by a family whose bloodline was supposedly cursed after involvement in English royal scandals. Now, over time, the town became a vortex of tragedy. Residents suffer horrific losses, entire families passed away by taking their own lives, people went mad or just vanished, and when the town basically just dissolved after that. Now, today, the woods that cover Dudleytown are eerily silent, no birds, no bugs. Paranormal investigators call it a dead zone. Visitors report overwhelming panic, nausea, and unexplained scratches appearing on their bodies. Even Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures refused to film an episode there, calling it one of the most dangerous locations in America. The Dark Entry Forest Association now owns the land and bans public access, but thrill seekers still sneak in. Some never make it back out without being changed in some terrifying way. Aokigahara in Japan, which is the forgotten cursed villages. Now, Aokigahara is infamous, the forest of doom, but what most people don't know is that on the edges of Aokigahara are forgotten villages that once practiced something darker than demise, Ab-Asut, which is the ancient and horrifying tradition of abandoning the sick and elderly in remote areas to just pass away. These ghost villages were already steeped in tragedy before the taking your own lives, epidemic took hold. Now, locals believe that by leaving loved ones to pass in the forest, they'd avoid starvation for the rest of the family, during famine. It wasn't an assassination, it was a sacrifice to them. Now, today, these villages are beyond repair, buildings half swallowed by vines and rot, shrines toppled over, and homes, still containing, tattered futons and rusted utensils. Visitors who enter often return with stories of spirits following them home, cameras that refuse to work, and a very eerie sense of being watched. Even Japanese psychics refuse to go near the forest, saying it's filled with yuri, which is restless souls trapped between life and the afterlife, angry at how they passed. Pripyat, Ukraine, the ghost town time forgot. Now, on April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Within 36 hours, over 49,000 people fled the nearby town of Pripyat. Now, what they left behind is a time capsule of nuclear terror, schools with half-marked tests, homes with dinner still on the table, and dolls' heads littering the streets, literally. But the radiation isn't the only thing that's stuck around. Paranormal investigators have documented cold spots in the warm summer months, sudden drops in temperature, phantom footsteps, and the sound of children giggling in the empty amusement park there. Now, one former resident swore she saw her mother standing in a window of their old apartment 15 years after she passed. Others Others have reported glowing humanoid figures appearing near the reactor. There's even a legend about the Blackbird of Chernobyl, a winged humanoid figure that dozens claimed to see before the disaster. So eyewitnesses, described red eyes and deafening screeches, and once the explosion occurred, well, the sighting stopped. Coincidence or something much more terrifying? Centralia, Pennsylvania. This is the town that's still burning today. Beneath the surface of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a fire has been burning for over 60 years. In 1962, a landfill fire accidentally ignited a coal seam that still smolders underground to this day. Now, roads buckle, smoke pour from cracks in the ground, the air reeks of sulfur and scorched earth, but it's not just the physical danger that's terrifying there. There are also chilling supernatural claims. Former residents and visitors have reported hearing voices in the smoke, including cries for help coming from beneath the ground. Some say that they've seen shadow figures moving inside the fog as well. A local priest once declared the land was cursed, saying the mine opened a gate to hell. And get this, Centralia directly inspired the ghostly town of Silent Hill in the video game and movie series. Today, only a few homes remain standing, but even those are technically illegal to inhabit, so don't go. A highway into town called Graffiti Highway has since been covered by the state to keep people out. Humberstone and Lenora in Chile, which is a grave-robbing ghost town. Now in the middle of Atacama Desert sit two mining towns kind of frozen in time and surrounded by demise. Now Humberstone and Lenora were once bustling with nitrate miners, but exploitation, brutal working conditions, and disease kind of decimated the population. Now they're full-blown ghost towns, and I mean that literally. Decades ago, grave robbers looted local cemeteries, leaving open coffins, shattered bones, and disturbed tombs under the desert sun. The result? Well, a spike in paranormal activity so intense that even scientists started paying attention. Visitors have captured apparitions walking across dusty streets. In EVP sessions, ghost hunters recorded chilling messages in Spanish, some sounding like miners screaming for help. Now, there are also reports of small, childlike figures appearing in doorways and then just vanishing into thin air. And the temperature often drops nearly 20 degrees inside these abandoned homes. Kadara, India, the village that disappeared overnight. Now, 2 centuries ago, the entire population of Kadara, around 1,500 people or so, vanished literally overnight. Now, according to legend, they left behind a curse so powerful that no one has ever been able to live there again. The story goes that a powerful minister demanded to marry a village girl against her will. Rather than surrender her, the entire community evacuated in secret, leaving behind food, clothes, and livestock. Before they left, they cursed the land, though. Now, attempts to resettle Kadara have failed, spectacularly. Farmers have found their animals kind of passed away overnight. Tourists reported disembodied voices and the sensation of being watched from behind. And there's also crumbling walls. Paranormal teams from around the world, including India's own ghost hunting societies, have visited Kadara, and nearly all report very unexplained activity. Oradour-sur-Glane in France, which is a villain frozen in mass execution. On June 10th, 1944, SS troops executed 642 people in the quiet village of Oradour-sur-Glane, including over 200 children. The town was left exactly as it was found: burnt out buildings, rusted bikes, sewing machines, and ashes. Now, the French government declared it a historical monument, but what's never been officially acknowledged is the heavy, suffocating presence that lingers there. Tourists report intense waves of sadness, seeing children's shadows darting between buildings, and hearing, basically just loud noises echoing in the distance. Some say they've heard the church bell ring, even though it was melted in the fire. Now, psychics who visited the site describe it as one of the most emotionally overwhelming places in Europe, so thick with sorrow it almost, takes you out. Now, these aren't ghost stories made up to sell books. These are places you can still visit if you dare. But after hearing what's happened to those who tried, the question is, should I go? It's no. Will I ever come back the same? Stay curious, but stay away. The Monroe Demon House in Hartford City, Indiana. It started like every other investigation. A team of ghost hunters entered an old house in Indiana called the Monroe House, a place whispered to be cursed. But within minutes, something in the basement made them bolt. Cameras were dropped, equipment left behind. No one wanted to go back inside. In that basement, there was a crawl space hidden behind a sealed door. Locals said the air inside was thick and metallic, and that strange growling sounds could be heard even from the street. Now, when investigators entered, they reported hearing whispers coming from the walls, and one of them claimed to see a shadowy figure crouched in the corner. Later, bones were allegedly found in that crawl space, small, broken, and human. No one ever confirmed where they came from. Now, during a later investigation, two well-known paranormal investigators spent 72 hours inside the house. They described seeing orbs moving on their own, feeling cold spots rush through their bodies, and watching doors slam with no one near them. One investigator admitted that the house made him physically ill. Locals say if you walk by at night, you can actually still see the upstairs window glowing faintly, even though the power was cut off years ago. The Poplar Hill Nanny House in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Now, it was supposed to be a peaceful new beginning. In 2014, journalist and musician Tom Maxwell and his wife, Brooke, found what seemed like their dream home, a beautiful, historic two-story in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Now, locals called it Nanny, but almost from the moment they unpacked their boxes, the house began to turn against them. Brooke was the first to notice the strange things happening. She said it started with the feeling that someone was standing behind her, watching her. Then one night, she woke up, paralyzed with fear, to see a tall, hooded figure leaning over her bed. Its arms were unnaturally long, its hands thin and bone-like. It just stared at her, and then all of a sudden, it was gone. Now, from that moment on, their dream home became a nightmare. Doors had been locked, they were found open in the morning. Footsteps would creak along the hallway upstairs when everyone was downstairs. The house had a heartbeat. It breathed at night. Tom tried to dismiss it. Old houses make noises, right? He told himself that over and over and over again, but soon, even he couldn't explain what they were actually seeing. One afternoon, a glass flew off the kitchen counter and shattered in front of them. Now, on another night, a door slammed so hard, it cracked the frame. In a room no one had entered all day. Then came the scratches. Brooke stepped into the shower one morning only to cry out in pain as long red welts appeared across her back, right before Tom's eyes. It looked like something invisible had clawed her. And, they both basically just stood frozen in shock. Now, after that, they actually began to see them, the apparitions. Now, Tom called them the Spook Parade. A woman in a 19th century bonnet appeared at the top of the stairs. A gray mist shaped like a man hovered by their daughter's room. Sometimes they'd catch sight of shadowy figures gliding silently from one wall to another and disappearing through them. Now, desperate, they brought in local paranormal investigators, but the team didn't last long. One man claimed that as soon as he entered the house, his equipment stopped working and his chest tightened as if someone was pressing against him. He described feeling a freezing breath against his neck, then hearing a voice whisper, "Leave now." Another investigator, a woman, ran out of the back room crying, saying something had brushed her hand in the dark. None of them ever came back. The Maxwells tried every form of protection they could think of: prayers, sage, salt lines across doorways. Tom even sprinkled salt along the baseboards and window frames, saying, if the house wants to be evil, fine, but it's not taking us with it. But the activity only got worse. Cold air would pour out from beneath doors, and the smell of perfume, old and powdery, filled the hallways at night. The family's dog would bark furiously at corners of the room where nothing stood, and the longer they stayed, the sicker they became. Headaches, fatigue, constant dread. After 9 agonizing months, the Maxwells couldn't take it anymore. They packed up in the middle of the night and left the house behind. Tom later said, "We didn't move out, we escaped." Now, to this day, the house still stands. Locals swear that even now, if you drive by late at night, you might see a light flicker on in an upstairs window, even though no one lives there. The Ammons Demon House, this is in Gary, Indiana. Now, this isn't just another haunted house story. This is one that left police officers, priests, and social workers traumatized. The year was 2011. Latoya Ammons and her 3 children moved into a modest rental home on Carolina Street in Indiana. Now, it looked perfectly ordinary, but it would soon be called one of the most terrifying true demonic cases in modern history. It started with flies. Now, in the dead of winter, thick black flies swarmed around the porch, clustering on windows and doors. No matter how many they actually hurt, they kept coming back. I mean, then came the sounds: footsteps on the basement stairs, heavy breathing in empty rooms, and doors slamming themselves shut. One night, Latoya's mother, Rosa Campbell, woke up to a dark shadow pacing in her bedroom. She said it felt like someone was standing over her, staring at her. It was pure evil. Now, what happened next pushed the story into legend. Latoya's children began to change. They'd talk to things that weren't there. They'd growl in deep voices that didn't sound human, and one day, in front of medical staff, one of her sons reportedly walked backwards up a wall, then flipped over and landed on his feet. Witnesses, including a hospital nurse and a DCS worker, confirmed what they saw. Priests were called in, exorcisms were performed. Police officers who investigated claimed they heard footsteps echoing in the basement when no one was actually inside. Now, one officer's recorder malfunctioned, then began playing distorted screams when replayed later. When renowned paranormal investigator Zach Bagans heard about the case, well, he bought the house outright to investigate it himself. But from the moment his team arrived, things went horribly wrong. Crew members fell sick, cameras, stopped for no reason. One investigator collapsed, claiming he felt something enter his body. I mean, he described a very heaviness in the room, like the air itself was pressing down. He said he saw shadowy figures darting across the hallways, and once, something unseen slammed the door with such force that the actual hinges bent. After documenting everything he could, Bagans made a shocking decision. He had the house demolished, completely torn down, claiming it was too dangerous to remain standing. I mean, whatever's in there, he said, should never have a chance to escape. Even skeptics couldn't deny that something unexplainable happened there. Police reports, social worker testimonies, and church records all confirm strange occurrences. And locals say after the demolition, nothing will grow on that lot. No grass, no weeds, nothing. The land is still empty today. A quiet patch of dirt surrounded by chain link fence, and residents swear they still hear voices at night drifting through the air where the house once stood. The Smurl haunting in West Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. For over a decade, the Smurl family lived in a nightmare that blurred the line between haunting and hell itself. From 1974 to 1989, Jack and Janet Smurl claimed their quiet family home was infested by something inhuman. It started with knocking sounds, flickering lights, and the stench of rotting flesh, but soon the attacks became physical. Their dog was thrown across a room, their beds would shake violently in the middle of the night. Janet said she was grabbed, scratched, and even attacked by something she couldn't see. Now, when famed demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated, they described the case as one of the darkest they'd ever faced. Now, during their time, their door slammed so hard the hinges bent and mirrors cracked spontaneously. Some paranormal researchers who visited the home reportedly refused to spend the night. One priest called it something beyond demonic. Eventually, the Smurls moved, but the house remained, and neighbors still claim they hear screams echoing from inside when the wind actually slows down. Balcon House in Scotland. Now, long before ghost hunting TV shows existed, there was the Balcon House, a 19th century mansion so feared it was called the most haunted house in Scotland. Now, the story began with Major Robert Stewart, who lived there in the 1800s. He believed in reincarnation, and he was convinced he'd return as a dog after his passing. Now, to prevent that, he reportedly unalived his own dogs so no other spirit could use them as vessels, which is insane. Now, after his demise, locals said the dogs came back for revenge. I mean, guests heard barking in empty halls, felt cold noses kind of brush against their legs, and saw shadowy shapes moving at night. Now, when Britain's Society for Physical Research investigated, basically in the 1890s, their investigators were overwhelmed. I mean, they documented apparitions of a ghostly nun, phantom footsteps, and sudden crushing cold that forced them out of rooms. One researcher quit mid-investigation, calling the energy inside unbearable. Another refused to ever discuss what she witnessed. By the 1930s, Balcon House was abandoned, and when it burned to the ground in the 1960s, locals said the fire glowed an unnatural green. So even in ruin, people still avoid walking across the land where it stood. These aren't your average haunted houses. These are places where reality seems to break, where investigators, priests, and skeptics all reach their limit. I mean, from basements full of bones to Indiana to ghostly nuns in Scotland, these stories remind us that sometimes there really is something in the dark that doesn't want to be found. So the next time you watch a paranormal investigation and think, I could handle that, just remember, these are the houses even the ghost hunters ran from. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. Now, imagine standing in a long, cold corridor, the paint peeling from the walls, the silence so heavy it presses against your chest. Suddenly, you hear footsteps echoing, but when you turn, no one's there. That's Eastern State Penitentiary, one of the most haunted prisons in the world. Built in 1829, this Gothic fortress pioneered the Pennsylvania system of total isolation. Prisoners were locked in tiny stone cells, forbidden to speak, forbidden to even see one another. The goal was penitence. Now, the result was madness. Now, visitors and guards reported hearing screams at night, even back in the 1800s. Inmates clawed at their walls, basically talked to themselves, and collapsed into silence, and those who resisted met punishment straight out of a nightmare. The mad chair, where men were strapped so tightly their circulation stopped until they were left maimed. Now, the iron gag, where a bar clamped into the prisoner's mouth and was basically chained to their hands behind their back. Every time they moved, the gag tore at their lips and tongue. Others were thrown into something called the hole, which was an underground pit with no light, no food, and no air for days at a time. All of that anguish left scars in the stone. Paranormal investigators who visit Eastern State often capture strange orbs, glowing streaks of light, and even disembodied voices on tape. One guard swore he saw a shadow figure pacing inside a locked cell. Another visitor described being overcome by nausea as though, the walls themselves were closing in. And then there's a story everyone knows. Al Capone, the most famous gangster of all time, was sentenced here in 1929. Unlike other inmates, Capone's was given a lavishly furnished cell with carpets, a desk, and even a radio. But even with his comforts, he was terrified. He would scream at night that James Clark, the man assassinated in the St. Valentine's Day mass assassination, well, he was in the room with him. That's what he claimed. Now, guards said he begged the ghost to leave him alone. Cell block 12 is still the most infamous. Guest reports laughing, echoing through the halls when no one's there. Cell block 6 is known for shadows darting from one doorway to another, and cell block 4 is where you'll hear footsteps that follow you even though you're alone. Now, some say it's just the echo of a broken building. Others swear it's the echo of broken souls. Cambria County Jail in Evansburg. Now, not all haunted prisons are huge Gothic castles. Some are small, tucked away in quiet towns, and that makes their stories even stranger. The Cambria County Jail in Evansburg is one of those places. Built in 1872, this jail became infamous for executions. Now, 11 men were hung up on its gallows. Locals still whisper that these condemned never left. Visitors claim they hear the sound of sobs and dragging chains near the site of the hang-ups. Now, the most disturbing tale is about a prisoner known as Smitty. According to legend, Smitty was locked in his cell one night only to vanish by morning. The bars were intact, the locks unbroken, guards searched everywhere, but he was gone. Now, some believe he escaped. Others say his spirit simply slipped out, leaving his body behind. To this day, the cell where Smitty was kept gives people an overwhelming sense of dread. Visitors describe flickering lights, sudden temperature drops, and the uneasy feeling of being watched. During paranormal tours, people have smelled cigarette smoke in empty corridors. Footsteps echo on staircases no one is climbing. The gallows area is especially active. Cold spots form suddenly, voices whisper in the dark, and some tourists have said they've even left in tears, claiming invisible hands push them. The jail's thick brick walls amplify every noise, making it hard to know what's real. But too many people have left shaken, convinced something beyond explanation is inside. Old Allegheny County Jail and Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh is home to not one but two prisons with chilling reputations, the Old Allegheny County Jail and the Western Penitentiary. The Old Allegheny Jail is a fortress-like building linked to the courthouse by the Bridge of Sighs. The most famous ghost story tied to this jail involves Mrs. Kate Soffel, the warden's wife. In 1902, she helped two convicted inmates escape after falling in love with them. The jailbreak ended violently. The brothers were hit by a firearm and Mrs. Soffel herself nearly unalived. People say her spirit lingers in the jail, wandering the corridors she once paced. Tour guides tell of hearing a woman's whisper, faint sobbing, or the sudden slam of cell doors when no one's actually near. Just across the city was Western Penitentiary, a prison that once held Confederate soldiers during the Civil War. Now, some claim those prisoners never left. Visitors report cold spots, muffled voices in the night, and shadowy figures dressed in outdated uniforms drifting through the halls. Paranormal groups have investigated and say they recorded faint cries and shouts and accents that don't sound modern. Even hardened locals admit these places just feel different. You can tour many old buildings without a problem, but in Allegheny and Western Penitentiary, it feels like the past is waiting for you. State Correctional Institution in Rockview, this is in Benner Township. And if there's one thing more chilling than abandoned prisons, it's the prison still in use because the energy there is fresh. Rockview is one of them. Now, since 1915, this prison has been the site of executions in Pennsylvania. More than 300 men have been put to demise here, first in the electric chair and later by lethal injection. Now, the prison death house is where condemned inmates spent their final hours. Guards whisper about it, footsteps echoing down empty halls, lights flickering in the execution chamber. The sensation of being watched even when they're alone. Some refuse to do rounds near the house unless they're paired with another officer. Visitors visitors on official tours say the air feels heavier in that building. Paranormal investigators who've managed to get permission describe recording unexplained sounds, knocks, cries, even static-like voices on electronic devices. Some claim this house carries the energy of every man who ever walked inside and just never walked out. Unlike other prisons, Rockview isn't frozen in time, it's still active. That means the terror is ongoing, and so of course are the whispers of ghosts. Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia. Now, Holmesburg Prison is maybe the darkest story of them all. Built in 1896, it became infamous not just for riots and assassinations, but for something even more disturbing: experiments. Beginning in the 1950s, inmates were used as test subjects for pharmaceutical and chemical companies. Men were exposed to really toxic substances, radiation, and even biological agents. Many of them suffered burns, scarring, and lifelong illnesses. Prisoners describe being treated like lab rats, their skin painted with chemicals that left really horrible blisters. Some claim they were injected with substances they just never identified. Decades later, survivors said Holmesburg left them scarred in body and in their soul. With that much human suffering contained in one place, it's no surprise people call it cursed. Paranormal investigators report, hearing screams echoing through abandoned cell blocks, locals walking past at night saying they've seen shadowy figures in the windows, pacing back and forth. Some visitors describe sudden nausea and panic attacks inside even. The building itself adds to the dread. Very long hallways, crumbling walls, barred windows that look like staring eyes. And when you walk through Holmesburg, you don't just see history, you feel it pressing down on you, as if the walls themselves remember. Now, each of these prisons hold more than criminals. They hold pain, grief, and fear that, refuses to basically pass on. Eastern State shows us what silence can do to the human mind. Cambria County proves executions don't erase suffering. The old Allegheny Jail and Western Penitentiary remind us that history still breathes in the dark. Rockview reveals the weight of passing itself, and Holmesburg carries scars of cruelty disguised as science. These aren't just ghost stories, they're reminders of how deep human suffering goes and how it lingers long after the gates close. So which one would you dare to enter? Would you walk the halls of Eastern State, sit in a cell where Al Capone begged a ghost for, or step into Holmesburg where human experiments still echo? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more terrifying dives into these places that history refuses to let go of.